Welcome to Municipals or Foes, at the crossroads of seriousness and silliness, a look at small town politics in rural Oklahoma. We're just two city council members discussing if your municipality is really your friend or foe. I'm Lauren Fuller, along with my co host Mike Similescu, and today our special guest is our state auditor, Miss Cindy Byrd. Cindy, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you. But
Yes,
what we
welcome,
really
Cindy.
are curious about is you're the state auditor, and what exactly does a state auditor do, and how in the world did you decide that that's what you wanted to do?
Well, first, thank you both for having me on the show. So, not many people know who their state auditor is or that they even have one. But 28 years ago, as I was graduating from East Central University in Ada, Oklahoma, I started looking around to see what positions I might be interested in. And there was an opening at the Oklahoma State Auditor and Inspector's Office. And I thought, this is close to home, it's a good place to start, and it would look great on a resume one day. Well, I started auditing across southeastern Oklahoma, and one of the very first jobs that I had was to go to Wilburton, Oklahoma. That's in Latimer County in southeast Oklahoma. And they put me in charge of auditing ad valorem receipts. Well, I was probably 22 at the time. I barely knew what property taxes were. But what they did is they set me at a table right beside the counter where people were coming in to pay their taxes. So I got a real good view of government taking money directly from the citizenry, and it made me be a very passionate auditor. And I fell in love with the job. The job has given me a sense of giving back to the community. It has a purpose to make sure your tax dollars aren't wasted, and I get to try to help some things in government as well. So that's how I ended up here.
Wow, so you just stayed with the state auditor all these years.
Yes. So whenever you talk about the state auditor's office and that position, we're in charge of auditing the state's financial statements each year. We're required to audit the federal funds that the state receives each year. And then we also do county government audits and of all 77 counties. Now, one thing that you see a lot about in the news is when we do investigative audits. Those we have to be requested to perform. So if you see us do a municipality or a school district, we've been requested by either the governor, the attorney general, or a district attorney, or maybe even a board or a citizen's petition to come in and audit. And those are generally the audits that make the headlines.
Well, what are some of the exciting ones you've had recently?
Well, it's been really busy since COVID because of the influx of pandemic funds that have come into Oklahoma. But one of the biggest audits that we did, and to date, is still the largest misappropriation of taxpayer funds in the history of the state, is the audit of Epic Charter Schools. That's currently being adjudicated. So, what we found, we were requested to do that audit by Governor Stitt. Whenever we went in, we found that 30% of every tax dollar that the school was given was being swept out into private accounts. And then from there, we found where money had been misappropriated. We found where funds had been diverted even into political campaigns. And that was a pretty big audit. It was very contentious. And it resulted in the founders of the school being charged with 15 felony counts, including racketeering, embezzlement, and money laundering. So that's probably the biggest audit to date. Then we've also done a big audit on Medicaid, the first of its kind in the nation. And we were asked to look at just one little element of Medicaid, and that was whether or not those enrolled in the Medicaid system were truly eligible to be there. And what we found was in 2019, fiscal year 2019, the state was spending about $5 billion a year on Medicaid, and that included both the federal and state sources. And we found between 35 and 37% of the expenditures made, the recipients for those funds, their eligibility had never truly been verified. So we were able to help that agency put some practices in place to try to tighten up how those funds were spent. So those are the two of the biggest audits that we've done.
What year was the Epic audit?
We released the EPIC audit in October of 2020, and it
And how
covered
long
a
did it take?
5-year period.
Cover a 5-year period. How long did it take you to do that particular audit?
It took 18 months, but I want you to keep in mind that audit was done during COVID. And so
Right.
my staff, who had nothing else to do but stay at home because you couldn't go out during that time, you couldn't really socialize or go on vacation, they put in a lot of overtime and just got that audit finished. So it was a record time of 18 months.
So it would have been a lot longer than if it wasn't for that
It would
ability
have been
there.
about
Okay.
6 months longer. It would have been a 2-year audit.
I'm not surprised about the Medicaid thing. I always wondered, and I know with COVID, you guys, the eligibility wasn't being checked anyway for a long period of time. So I'm sure we're back to square one when it comes to those type of things. But
Yes.
I'm not surprised just from personal experience with being in the healthcare field that a lot of people that are probably not supposed to be on those Medicaid rolls are on those Medicaid rolls just because they figure out a way to game the system, and the government's not very good about actually enforcing those requirements.
Yeah. One of the biggest things that would surprise you is even though the federal government and through their federal agency CMS sets the criteria for that, the one thing that you have that you really require to be able to determine if someone is eligible is held at the federal level, but yet state auditors across the nation are not allowed to see that information. We have to try to piece things together here in our own state.
Fun.
And that is something that I'm actively working on at the national level to give state auditors access to the information we need to really help clean up the rolls and make sure that we're only spending money for those who truly need it.
That's awesome. Well, can you tell us anything about any current audits that you are working on?
Well, I do want to tell you about the Tulsa Public Schools audit that was just released a couple of months ago. This audit, of course, Tulsa Public Schools, public school district, they have around a half a billion dollar a year budget, and we were asked to go in and look at a 3-year period to determine if any funds had been misused. And so what we found was that a lot of money had been transferred out into nonprofits and NGOs. And so as we were looking at the expenditures of the school and looking at the invoices and the contracts, we were having great difficulty determining what the school was spending money on and what they were actually receiving in return. So we had a big finding about the gross financial mismanagement at this school. And then what we further found, because one of the objectives that Governor Stitt, he was the one who requested the audit, asked us to look into was whether or not the school had complied with House Bill 1775, which restricted using any taxpayer funds for critical race theory. And then there were also administrative rules that brought in some of the DEI factors. And we found that approximately $35 million had been spent on DEI initiatives. And it was also those expenditures where we could not determine what the school actually received for the money spent. So again, that was very alarming, especially with the proficiency rates of reading and math at Tulsa Public Schools.
That's pretty
Fantastic.
astounding.
No, definitely seems to be a common theme across the state with some of these agencies and government. I mean, school districts, that type of thing. Seems like we tend to find a lot of this stuff over the last couple of years. Um, Tell us about the Swadley's barbecue.
Well, I'm personally a fan of eating at Swadley's Barbecue. I think they have some great food, but we are actually auditing the Department of Tourism, who had contracts with Swadley's Barbecue to put restaurants into the state parks. So that audit was requested initially by District Attorney David Prater in Oklahoma County. And then whenever the new Attorney General came in, he took over the audit. So we are currently working with him. But because a lot of that information has been obtained through multi-county grand jury subpoenas, we're not allowed to release that information or that report until we have proper authorization to do so. But we will be releasing that in the next couple of months is what I'm hearing. And I would say at the heart, and some of this has already been reported in the news, so it's fine for me to talk about this part. But at the heart of this issue is the fact that the state did not properly put these restaurant contracts out for bid. And so whenever you look at anything in state government, we don't want government picking winners and losers. Everything needs a true RFP competitive bidding process so that the taxpayer gets the best deal for the best price. And that was at the heart of the concern. And then there were some questions with the invoices that were turned in. So that's going to be a very interesting audit whenever that comes to light. Now, because of what was found through that audit and through some of the audits of federal funds, we are now also investigating contracting and procurement processes at the Office of Management and Enterprise Services. That's the state agency responsible for spending, billions in tax dollars each year.
Well,
Sounds like you have your hands full. Listen, we have dealt just a little bit with this kind of stuff at the city level. I mean, when we came into office over 2 years ago, there was already a request with your office to audit the city of Durant. And we came in going, well, what are we auditing? And so I know that we came in and looked at everything and said, you know what, at this point in time, like, even if there was mishandlings, all of those people are gone. It's out of the way. But more than that, we couldn't determine what exactly they were looking for. So can you tell us a little bit, like, when a city requests an audit, what exactly do they have to be looking for or requesting?
Well, the city can, let's just say the city of Durant. The city of Durant can request my office to look into any objectives that they think need an audit. Like I said earlier, if you think that money is missing from a fund, you would ask us to come in and investigate that fund to see if all receipts were properly receipted. Or if you feel like there have been unlawful expenditures from a fund, you would say, please come in and look at these expenditures. Tell us if they complied with the law or a ballot initiative or whatever might put the constraints on those expenditures. Whenever we get a request for an audit, sometimes it's very hard for those requesting it to really tell us what they want. So we have to drill down and get them to tell us what the problems were. But if you don't know what you're asking for in an audit, it's like giving someone a blank check to the bank account of the city and saying, just go audit everything. Everything doesn't need an audit. Some things can be looked at just by council members or even the personnel there at the city. The problem comes into play whenever a city appears to be secretive or not sharing information. That is our number one reason that prompts an investigative audit of municipalities, and that's when someone down at City Hall isn't providing open records requests in a timely manner. It causes the citizenry to get very suspicious, and then they come to our office and they start a citizen petition process, or they start going to the council meetings and demanding that the council members request an audit.
so the citizens can actually do a petition to your office, and then is there a certain threshold that they have to meet to say it has to be done, or is it something that you kind of look at and say, well, this is, something that's worthwhile we need to look at, or is this something that, it's not within our realm, or if this is something that's not, is a waste of time?
So the way a citizen's petition process works is someone has to come to my office and say, "Hey, we want a citizen's petition audit." And so we will sit down with them and ask them, "What do you want us to look at?" And if it is something that can be audited, I have to list it as an objective. And once we get the objectives put together, then we estimate a cost and we make sure that that cost is at the top of the petition, where citizens who sign the petition also understand they are paying for it. That petition is given to the person who requested it. They have 30 days to get signatures of 10% of the registered voters in that district, and then turn it back into the state auditor's office. At that point, it is verified through the election board that those are in fact registered voters of that district. And if they obtain the needed signatures, then we have the immediate authorization to start that audit.
So this is it's not like, hey, I could just put a petition on Facebook and I can get the state auditor to step in. It's literally an official step-by-step significant, kind of like where we do the initiatives or the constitutional amendments where you get petitions signed. Like, it's not just, hey, a bunch of us are gonna sign something on the internet and the state auditor is gonna do a audit.
Right. It is a very formal process. Now, I do want anyone listening to this to know that when someone comes to my office, the first thing we try to do is mediate this request for an audit. If we have stopped or prevented some audits just because we will call the city hall and say, if you don't give these citizens the records that they want, they are going to get a citizen's petition, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. So that sometimes helps city officials start working with their concerned citizens. Now, if that citizen still wants an audit, by law, they can still get one. But most of the time, citizens just want answers. And I applaud them for being involved in their government and wanting answers. But none of us want a costly, unneeded audit if it's just down to a situation of turn over the records where someone can see what you've done with their money.
So
And I
tell
think
us a little
I
bit
think we
about
share that, right? I think nobody's here to hide anything. Like we're, at least from me and Lauren, we're new at this. There's nothing that we're hiding or wanting to, keep away from the citizenry. Honestly, I think the city does a pretty good job of turning records releases over. I'm pretty sure that's the case as far as I know. But I agree with you. Obviously, if there's a concern, then they should step up. But I feel like, sometimes maybe we're a little bit, but it's important that, you explain the process, because I didn't know I didn't even know that was a thing. So I'm glad that you explained that to us.
Well, and what I don't think most people understand is the cost, Cindy. So like, I'd love for you to touch on like, how much does it cost and why does it cost to do these things?
It takes a lot to go through records and put that into a report and be able to sit on a stand in the courtroom and testify to the accuracy of your information. Usually the minimum cost for an audit is $20,000, but sometimes these municipal audits range anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000. And again, we're not here trying to drum up business. I've got a lot of audits to do. So if we can mediate in any way, we're always trying to do that.
Just by curiosity, how much did your Tulsa schools audit cost?
That audit cost close to $200,000.
Okay.
But I would tell you that we have already found where I missed one of the important points of that audit as well. We found where the director of bond and energy, an employee of Tulsa Public Schools, he was an architect and he was in charge of the contracts for the funds where the citizens had voted for bond initiatives or bond proposals. And so we found that he was rating one engineering firm as the highest to get the contracts. And then on the personal side, he had a consulting company that he owned. And then he would go out and contract with that engineering firm who was getting the contracts. And we found in 1 year, it was over $300,000 that he had received, I think,
Wow.
from that engineering firm. And his annual salary at the Tulsa Public Schools District was $120,000 a year. And he was using the school office and resources to help run his personal business. So, those are some of the things that you find in that. So again, going forward, it's probably going to save the school a lot of money.
Sure.
And they will, the cost is less than what the benefit of the audit was. So, it was a very beneficial audit to them to get things at the school straightened out.
I was just curious because I didn't know, because that was a big one, right? So that was, because auditing some of these smaller towns, is probably not as much, but I was curious what it would cost, that, and that came out of the state government, or is that out of Tulsa Public Schools?
Tulsa Public Schools had to pay for that audit. So no matter whether I audit a state agency or I audit a city or a school district, each one of those entities has to pay for their audit. My office is not appropriated to pay for the audit for the auditors that I have. We have to run like a business, and we have to keep our costs low, or we get in trouble with legislators, and we have to bill each of these entities for the work that we do.
Well, I know, like, I think about some of the stuff I hear locally, and you might hear an example of, well, you guys or the city council or whoever had appropriated $20,000 for the animal shelter, let's just say, right? And now it's not there. Where did the money go? And I'm like, who knows? Like, it probably went to fix a police car, because like, funds are finite, right? And sometimes like, you have good intentions with your money, and yes, you budget it for something, but as the year goes on, just like your own personal budget, like, you have to shift things around, and everybody gets real upset because they're like, well, there's supposed to be money for this and it was set aside for that. Like, why is it not there? Somebody's being shady. Who took the money? And we're just all going, do you want to look at the budget? Like, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, usually with those, it's kind of a liquid, right? So it moves. You can move money around as long as you account for where it's going.
Right.
I think that's important to, because I don't think people understand that. They think like you get 20,000 here because we have leftover funds for certain things some years, and then that either rolls over this or is used somewhere else. As long as it's accounted for, I think that's probably okay. As long as it's within what the tax or whatever is meant to be for. Unless it has to be spent somewhere and then you don't spend it there, then that's not okay. Like if we took, I don't know, the infrastructure, the capital improvements task, and we spent it on, I don't know, something else, so that's not appropriate. I don't know. So those type of things. I mean,
Here's an idea. All of these budgets that have some of the financial information is filed on the state auditor's website, where your citizens could go out here and type in City of Durant. They could pull up your financial statement audits, where you have an annual audit done by a CPA, outside CPA every year, and your city budget that you have to file with the state auditor's office is also on there. And they can really go in and see where that money, if it was set aside in your budget for something, such as the animal shelter, and then it had to be transferred over into the police unit or the police budget, you'll be able to see those transfers. And that's a really good piece of information for any concerned citizens to start looking at. And that really should be the first place they look before talking about an audit.
That's a good piece of information.
I didn't know about that either. I learned something else. Yeah.
Well, I know, like quarterly, we put those. We go over financials every quarter, and we put those adjustments so that people can see them, and in our city council minutes for everybody to see where those adjustments are made. It's just
They are. We approve them every council meeting.
Familiar with how to read financial records. Sometimes it's difficult to navigate those and understand where things are being moved. And obviously it doesn't tell a story, right? You're just seeing the numbers go from one account to the next. You don't understand why those had to be moved. And sometimes that's the story that we have to tell, but it's hard to answer every specific line that comes across, right?
Yeah, it is very hard to, especially when someone catches you, on the road or somewhere and just wants to know some of that information. It's always best just to direct them back to the officially filed copies, and or else somebody at the city hall can help answer their questions. But a lot of these answers, or all of these questions, most of these questions can be answered very easily.
So going back real quick.
I was just going to say, with Elon Musk having uncovered so much at the federal level, and Doge becoming a real thing, everyone started asking a lot more. I get a lot more concerned citizens requests today than I ever have. And while I enjoy the citizen input and engagement, it's also it's a lot. So I understand the questions that you're getting.
No, I agree. I think you're right about that. Let's go back. I got a question. So you were when you said you kind of always were for state. So how did you get to politics, right? State auditor politics. It's an elected position, right? Did you do politics before that while you worked at the state auditor's office, or did you just decide one day, hey, I want to run for state auditor? Because we're going to transition from this to obviously lieutenant governor's race. But I was kind of curious the background for your political career.
So no, I have been very non-political my entire life, because as an auditor, you have to stay unbiased in everything. And as I'd worked for the auditor's office, I would tell you that I was not even a public speaker. I couldn't get on an interview like this and just talk about things so easily. So that's definitely come in the last decade. But as we looked across the office and term limits came into effect, we had a really great group of auditors together, a great management team. We were all doing a great job. And Gary Jones, who was the state auditor before me, he was term limited. And I was the one that had more experience, that had really done some high profile audits. And he approached me and said, have you ever thought about running? And I said, Gary, I'm not a public speaker. I'm not a politician. And he said, but somebody has to take care of this office, because this office, and people don't realize this office belongs to the taxpayers. We are part of government, but we stand on the side of the taxpayer. And sometimes it feels like we're on an island all by ourselves. And so this office that I've spent so much of my career in it was important to me to take care of it and make sure that it continued to produce the good work that we had done. So that's whenever I ran for office in 2018. And I thought it was really easy because for, I don't know, 7 months, I didn't have an opponent. I was out here talking to everybody. It was fun. And then all of a sudden you get an opponent and you realize how ugly politics can get at that point. But I won in the primary. I was outspent 6-1. I'd only raised $100,000 for a statewide race, and my opponent had put in $650,000 of his own money to win the race, and I beat him. And that year, I garnered more votes than any candidate had in the history of the state. So I can't say that without also saying that I believe that the grace of God put me in this office, and I've always felt a big responsibility to take care of it and make sure I was doing what I was supposed to do. And when I ran for re-election in 2022, I had put out the audit of Epic Charter Schools, which, looking back, I should have renamed that audit to how the founders of a charter school took over the checkbook. That they put a lot of dark money. I think it was close to $1.4 million. In my re-elect, I was able to raise $248,000. So again, I was outspent almost 6-1. And that year, I won by a higher vote margin than any of the federal delegation or any of the statewide candidates. So again, the grace of God. And now I'm going to be term limited. And I have all of this knowledge. I'm Dr. Similescu. I'm going to go ahead and jump into why I'm running for lieutenant governor. I have all this knowledge of how state, county, and municipal governments work together, how all of the funding flows work. I have all of this knowledge of the audits that I've done and reported on how government's not working. And I still have a lot to offer the state, a lot of knowledge and a lot of work that's still left to be done.
That's a great
So tell us a little bit
transition.
more about what the lieutenant governor position entails or what they actually do, because I don't think a lot of people know exactly what the lieutenant governor actually does.
Well, it's important to note that the governor and the lieutenant governor run independently of each other. They do not run on a ticket. So I am not running with one of the governor candidates. I am running on my own ticket. And as I look at the lieutenant governor's race, you have to ask, what is our current lieutenant governor doing? And I think Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell has done a great job with tourism. He has implemented the fishing trail. He's done some other things. He's really promoted Oklahoma. And while I want to continue promoting Oklahoma as he has, one of the boards that he sits on is the Film and Music Advisory Commission. And so I've had 32 Grammy Award winners and Oklahoma Hall of Famers join in to back me in this campaign because we want to really promote the music industry in Oklahoma. We have so much talent, even right here in southeastern Oklahoma, the talent that we have, and we don't want those stars that we have to leave the state to be seen and heard. So that will be one priority. But whenever you think about the lieutenant governor, I would challenge people to look at it in this manner. The state of Oklahoma has a $35 billion a year budget. It's close to that. The governor is the CEO of the state, and the lieutenant governor is the number 2. So whenever you start looking at all the things that a lieutenant governor can do and all of the boards that they sit on, the lieutenant governor sits on the commissioners of the land office. That board is responsible for overseeing a $3 billion trust fund that is dedicated to fund education in Oklahoma. The lieutenant governor sits on the Board of Equalization. That board is looking to make sure that the state of Oklahoma has a balanced budget each year. Any protest from companies that are centrally assessed, we have to look to make sure that those valuations are proper. And one thing I haven't mentioned is I used to have an appraiser's license. I used to do appraisals. So my knowledge is very beneficial in that area. And then whenever you think about the bonds that the state of Oklahoma issues, we have one audit I haven't had a chance to mention was the Turnpike Authority audit that we are currently working on. There is a lot in Oklahoma that our lieutenant governor touches. And as a CPA, I'm not sure I've mentioned that, I am a certified public accountant with all of that knowledge and history. I could be a great asset to our next governor. One thing that really concerns me is that we spend 80% of every dollar in Oklahoma on education and health. And we are ranked nationally in the lowest level for both of those things. So if we are going to improve Oklahoma and promote Oklahoma, we need to also try to fix some of the structural issues that we have, because we know that President Trump is trying to bring business back to the United States. I want Oklahoma to get its share. And if we're going to get our share, we're going to have to fix some of these issues that we have. And only then will we truly be able to promote Oklahoma.
What a great answer, Cindy. I love
Right,
it.
that was really good. Yeah, no, definitely. We appreciate you answer. That covers pretty much everything in that answer. So we do appreciate that. Was a good one. Tell us, when's the primary? Do you have an opponent? And when's
There are
the
a few
general
people.
election?
There are a few people who have filed for the lieutenant governor's race. So it's a full race. We're out here campaigning every weekend. The first primary race, our first primary election, is June 30th of 2026. And while that may seem a long time away, that's a full year away, the time to start is now. You have to start gathering your volunteers. You have to start laying the groundwork. And that's what I'm out here doing every weekend, while still being your state auditor and making sure I'm getting that work done as well. So I am looking for volunteers if you want to come be part of the Byrd team.
Yeah, tell them how to contact you, Cindy. Let's send them your way.
Yeah.
So it's real easy. Go to cindybyrd.com. That's CINDYBYRD.com. And you can sign up to be a volunteer. You can reach out to us, be one of our lead team members in your community. And of course, we're always looking for donations as well. So you can come be a part of it. We appreciate any and all help that we get.
What is your campaign slogan?
Byrd is the word in 26
Byrd is
for
the
Lieutenant
word.
Governor.
There it
That's
is.
good.
That's awesome.
We like it. We like it. That's a
Man.
great one. That was one of my favorite ones I've seen so far.
We've covered a lot of information here, from the state level to the local level
Yeah.
to just politics in general. So I think our listeners are going to really enjoy this content. And we appreciate you coming on, Cindy. It has been a pleasure to go over this material with you. We're going to wrap it up. Do you have any last words for our listeners?
You know, I just want people to know that out of the 350 audits I put out each year, you hear about 10 or less, which means there's a lot more going right in government than going wrong. And anytime that you feel like you need help, you're always welcome to reach out to me, either on the state auditor's website or my campaign website. And I truly appreciate the honor to serve Oklahoma.
Isn't that the truth? It's normally positive, right?
Yes.
We just
That's
tend
what
to
we say
focus on the
too.
negative.
It's positive. More positives than negatives, right? Even at the city level.
That's right.
Some days.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, Cindy, for being on here, and we will talk with you soon.
Okay,
Y'all have a
thank you
good day.
both.